Hey, Thunkers, this is Professor Dave from dragandropcode.com. In the previous videos of the series, I showed you how to take, basically a spreadsheet, right, of information, ratings, and musicians and users, and, display it. And then we also computed the total of all the ratings and the average of all the ratings, okay? In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do it for each of the musicians separately. So it gets a little trickier, right? Now we want to add up just Drake's, which is going to be 9 plus 5 is 14. So we have to do a little filtering on the data, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so here's the app called Music Ratings, and our goal, we're going to have to use a couple new concepts or a couple new blocks. The count with is another repeat block. We looked at the for each item. That's what we used in the previous video, and that just goes through all the items in a single list. And in this case, we're going to use count with because we need to actually loop through two lists, right? We're going to have our musicians and we're going to have our ratings, and we need to look at both of those. And so count with lets us kind of get an index. This I is short for index, and it means, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. It keeps track of where you are in the list, and we're going to use that instead. Okay, so we're going to use the count with block. We'll also have to use this from the list, be able to get one of the index, the item from the list. So I've got some list of stuff. Grab, if I is a variable that's 2 or 4, grab the fourth thing, or in this case, grab the ith thing. Okay, and we'll use this count with block in this case because we have two lists that we want to look at the same time, because we need to know which musician we're talking about when we look at a rating. We're also going to use if blocks, and if blocks just let us kind of check to see, like if it's Nicki Minaj or if it's Drake as the musician. Okay, so that's what we're shooting for, and let's get down to it. I'm going to open up our music ratings app. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of let's just add a little bit of user interface stuff here. So, and it's not going to be pretty, but let's just call this label. We're not going to change it with code or anything, but it's the average of all. Okay, or sorry, that's actually the total, right? And that's right in front of the thing that's going to end up the total label. And then let's add one more label, which will just say this was the average, just so we know when we actually test this thing that we're showing the right stuff. So this is going to be the average, for all. Okay, now if I run this, it just looks a little bit better, right? We know what we're talking about. Okay, we could also make it prettier by doing a little more editing. Okay, I'm also now what we care about is, and let's just do it for one of the musicians, but let's get Drake's average. Okay, and so I'm going to call this the Drake average label. Okay, and we'll put nothing in there to start, and we'll just put it over here. And I'm going to add one more label, which is actually just saying what this number is going to show. And I'm just going to say Drake average here. So the text of it is what's going to show on the user interface. And if I run it right now, of course, nothing's going to show up in the Drake average, except my dash. Okay, so we got to write the code for it. So let's go to the blocks, and I got to go back to editing for my test. So in my blocks right now, when I open the app, I go through all the ratings and compute the total, the average. Okay, so I'm going to add what's called a function, and think of a function as just like a sub program. And this one's going to be compute filtered averages, or we could call it compute Drake averages, whatever. But we're filtering a big list of numbers and just getting some of them. Okay, and if I have a function, I'm going to put some code blocks in here. But once I have that function, I want to make sure I call it. Okay, so when the screen opens, I'm going to do all the stuff we already did, And then I'm going to call this function, which is going to do some more work for us, which we haven't shown that yet. Okay, so I need a couple more variables. I need 2 variables to keep track of Drake's information. One is going to be the Drake total. Okay, and it's going to start off as 0, of course. Well, at least we'll initialize it to 0. And then I'm going to do Command C, Command V, and I'm going to call this Drake count. So if you think about it, we actually need to keep track of 2 things. We need to keep track of, oh, sorry, let me show this spreadsheet a little bit better. We need to keep track of how many Drake ratings there are. In this case, 2 and 5 are both Drake ratings, so there's going to be 2 of them, and then the total is going to be 9 plus 5 is 14. Okay, but as we're actually going through this list of ratings, we're going to need to keep track of those 2 numbers. Okay, I'm going to go to the control folder. I'm not going to use the for each block. I'm going to use the count with block. Okay, because I actually need to look at 2 different lists, and the count with will let me do that. I don't want to go up to 10. I want to go through this whole ratings list, right? I want to walk through all of them, look at all of them, and check each one to see if it's Drake's. So I'm going to change the list it's going, or I don't want to put ratings list here. What I want to put is the length of ratings list. So I'm going to grab the length of block, get rid of the default list that's in there. And we know by looking at it as humans that the length of that list is 5. But the computer needs to know it. And basically it's going to say, okay, I've got this new variable I, which stands for index. It's going to start out as 1. Every time it's going to get 1 bigger. So it'll be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And it's going to do it 5 times. The length of, or whatever the length of the rating list is, right? And that's going to give us a variable called index. So think of this variable I going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's cool. Now what we need to do is actually stick each of the numbers we get into another variable. So I'm going to have one more variable, and I'm going to call it, I'm just going to call it a rating. Okay, and I'll just initialize it to 0, just because it's a number. That's all we know at this point. But as we go through here, we're going to set the rating. And I have to grab a set block and then change it. So I set the rating. We're going to change it to one of the things in our ratings list. So I'm going to go to the list block and grab this get. Okay, and what I want to do is in the list ratings list, I want to get, right now it says get the first thing. So if I did that, it would always get 9. But really what I want to do is I want to grab the ith thing, because I is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I want to grab the ith thing every time, the index thing. Okay, so rating the first time, and if we think about, just envision, this is not going to be in the spreadsheet, but if we've got a variable called I that starts off as 1, if we get the I thing the first time, it'll give us a 9. If I then changes to 2, we get the ith thing, it'll give us the 10, and so on. Okay, fundamental coding where you have this index and you want to, instead of get the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th thing, you want to get the indexed or the ith thing from a list. And that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we need to grab each rating, but we also need to grab each musician. So I'm going to create another variable. Okay, and instead of naming it rating, I'm going to name it musician. And I'm going to set my musician to just the blank text. Okay. And now I'm going to come down here and Command C, Command V. So as I'm looping through all the numbers 1 to 5, I'm going to grab not from my ratings list, but I'm going to grab the I thing and I'm going to change it to the variable musician. Okay. And I realized I don't have a musicians list yet. I actually need to go to my spreadsheet and I need to grab the whole list of all the art. Well, actually, it's called artists, right? But I've called my variable musicians. Okay, so, and I can do that in my screen opens. I'm just going to copy Command C, Command V on a Mac is how you copy, but I'm going to set my, sorry, I need to create a new variable as well. So I'm going to Command C, Command V this variable, but I'm going to call this one musicians list. Okay, and I'm going to set my musicians list. When the screen opens, I'm going to set it to the list of values in the spreadsheet called music ratings. I don't want the ratings now. I want the artist column. So now I'm going to have a list of stuff, which is going to be a list with Drake, Nicki Minaj, Drake, and Nicki Minaj. Okay, that's my musician list. And in fact, as I walk through, going through everything, I'm going to set the current musician to the ith musician. Okay, so all I've done right now is I'm looping through, I'm grabbing the rating and the musician, and now I need to kind of process those. And what I want to know is if the musician's Drake, I want to add that rating to my total I'm building up. Okay, so here's where I need to use an if block. Okay, and my, this block is pretty simple. I'm just going to say, you know what, if the variable called rating, which holds kind of the current one, right, the current one I'm looking at, if that's equal to, oh, sorry, not that, I want the musician. If the musician is equal to the text called Drake, or I could put Nicki Minaj here, right, either one. But if the musician, as I'm going through here, and as I'm, basically as I'm walking through the spreadsheet, if the musician is Drake, then grab that number and add it to my Drake total. Otherwise, don't, right? So if the musician's Drake, now I want to set my Drake total. Sorry, I need to actually grab a set. I don't want to set my overall total. I've already done that work up here. Here, I want to set my Drake total, and I want to set it to itself plus this rating that I'm looking at, the current rating. Okay. And just to be careful, I'm going to, not to be careful, but I need to do it. Before I even start all this, my Drake total needs to be set to 0. So I'm going to initialize it to start at 0. I'm going to walk through all the ratings. If the musician in that rating is Drake, I'm going to add to my total here and add that rating to it. Okay. I also have a variable called Drake count. So remember, I'm trying to get the average. So I'm also going to change my Drake count by 1, right? Oh yeah, I got one that was Drake. I need to actually count that. And so I'm also going to increment. It's a little bit different because I'm not adding a rating to this. I'm adding just the number 1 to it, right? So every time I get a one that's Drake, I'm going to add 1 to my Drake count. Okay, and once again, I better initialize my Drake count to 0. Okay, so these guys start at 0. I walk through, if I get one that's Drake, and if you'll remember the spreadsheet, there's 2 of them. So my Drake count should end up as 2, and my Drake total should end up, I think it's 14. All right, okay, so we've got those guys. We could test and put those in a label, but all we have right now is a Drake average label. So let's just see if we are getting this right, and make sure you put this below the loop, right? You want to go through all your processing first. And what we want to do is divide. And so I'm going to grab the divide block. And what I want to divide is the Drake total, which for my sample data, I think is going to be 14. And I want to divide it by Drake count, which I'm hoping is going to be 2. Okay, so I should get an average of 7. All right, so let's test this out. And so far, so good. And yeah, so I'm getting a Drake average of 7. I still got my total of all of them, 39, and an average of 7.8. Okay, and of course, you could put another if block in here that is if the musician is Nicki Minaj, and you'd have to have a couple variables for her to keep track of her total and her count. Okay, just briefly, let me go back to the spreadsheet. So what we did is filtering data using the if statement, only items that are Drake, and